Max Verstappen is, without question, one of the worst drivers in Formula 1 history. No, seriously, hear me out, guys. This man is absolutely terrible. He's terrible at losing. Terrible at giving boring press conference answers, terrible at letting people pass him, terrible at having a bad qualifying lap when it actually matters, terrible at cracking under pressure, terrible at letting a championship slip away when his car is slower than the competition. I'm sure you get the point right now. Max Verstappen is an actual villain.
I don't care. How about that?
The kind of villain you're not supposed to like, but somehow can't stop watching. Truth is, there has never been anyone quite like Max Verstappen in this sport, and when he's eventually gone, there never will be again. Let's get one thing straight before we go any further. Every villain has their origin story. Max did not have a normal upbringing. What Max had was Jos Verstappen, a former F1 driver who looked at his newborn son and thought, this is my second attempt at a championship. Jos was the kind of father who treated racing not as something his son enjoyed, but as something his son owed him. Training sessions that would make a military drill sergeant uncomfortable, pressure that most adults couldn't handle, let alone a child, and the cherry on top, the man literally left Max at a gas station as a teenager after a bad karting result. That is low-key a scene from a horror movie. But the truth is, it worked. Somehow through all of that, Max didn't crack. Instead, he got shoved into a Formula 1 car at 17 years old, before he even had a driver's license. Nearly died a couple of times getting used to machinery that most experienced drivers struggle with, and somehow came out the other side as the monster we know today. Max's real introduction to Formula 1 didn't even begin with a race. It began in a practice session at Suzuka in 2014, when a 17-year-old kid stepped into Jean-Eric Vergne's Toro Rosso during Japanese Grand Prix weekend and casually became the youngest person in history to participate in a Formula 1 race event. 17 years and 3 days old. At that age, most drivers are still figuring out Formula 3. At that age, I was worried about my upcoming math exam. What makes it even crazier is that this wasn't some long, gradual apprenticeship. A few months later, he joined the Red Bull Junior team, and although Mercedes had also shown interest in bringing him into their development program, Max chose the Red Bull path, which, in hindsight, Mercedes are absolutely regretting. Fast forward to 2015 Australia. 17 years and 166 days old. Max Verstappen lined up on a Formula 1 grid as a full-time driver, breaking Jamie Alguersuari's record to become the youngest starter in World Championship history. Let that sink in. The sport that worships experience had just handed one of its 20 seats to a teenager who technically could not rent a car, and he did not look out of place. In that debut race, he was running in the points before an engine failure robbed him of the finish, and Max was already shown a tiny glimpse about what Formula 1 is all about. For sure, raw talent is one thing, but reliability is another thing entirely. Ask Ferrari. A week later in Malaysia, though, he qualified 6th and finished 7th, becoming the youngest driver ever to score points in Formula 1, which is quite abnormal for rookies. Very rare in Formula 1. Monaco 2015 was when he got hit with his first criticism when Felipe Massa labeling him dangerous, and if we are being very honest, early career Verstappen was dangerous on the track. But even in the chaos, the ceiling was obvious. He finished his debut season with the action of the year, and by the end of the season, he collected Rookie of the Year and Personality of the Year as well. At this point, everyone knew this dude was built differently. 2016 began at Toro Rosso again, and you could already sense that patience was not his strongest personality trait. In Australia, he grew so frustrated, stuck behind his teammate Carlos Sainz, or maybe he found Carlos's behind appealing. We can't say for sure. But this dude rammed into Carlos while attempting a late overtake. And just 5 races into the 2016 season, Red Bull said they had seen enough, and made one of the boldest mid-season decisions in recent memory. Daniel Kvyat was demoted back to Toro Rosso, and Verstappen was promoted to the senior Red Bull Racing seat starting in Spain, and that very race put Max on the map. On the opening lap, both Mercedes drivers took each other out, and suddenly the 18-year-old in his first race for Red Bull found himself in genuine contention. Max inherited the lead and then had to defend it from Kimi Räikkönen for lap after lap, an 18-year-old casually holding off a world champion in a Ferrari in his debut race for a top team, and he won. At 18 years and 228 days old, Max Verstappen became the youngest Grand Prix winner in history, breaking Sebastian Vettel's record. You couldn't write a better script for the early career stage of one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. The 2017 season was a different test, with mechanical failures and first lap incidents robbing him of 7 finishes in the first 14 races, and at times it felt as though reliability was his greatest rival. Yet when the car held together, he was unstoppable. In Malaysia, just after turning 20, he overtook Lewis Hamilton for the win. In Mexico, he stormed to another victory after boldly taking the lead at the first corner. By 2018, Max became consistency itself. The first half of the season was filled with incidents, but from Canada onward, the performances became way better. By the end of 2018, Verstappen had finished 4th in the championship with 2 wins and 11 podiums. More importantly, he no longer felt like just the sport's reckless prodigy. He felt inevitable. 2019 came around and Red Bull made another huge decision. They ditched Renault power and partnered fully with Honda, which at the time felt either genius or completely unhinged depending on who you asked. Honda had spent the previous few years being politely described as a work in progress. Daniel Ricciardo also left for Renault, which by the way was the turning point of his career, seeing how he went out sad. But this also meant for the first time since 2016, Red Bull was Max's team. Pierre Gasly came in as the new teammate, and from the very first races, the dynamic was obvious. In Australia, Max put the Honda-powered Red Bull on the podium, the first Honda podium since 2008. Austria, though, was the turning point. After a poor start dropped him down the order, he charged back through the field and then passed Charles Leclerc late in the race in a move that sparked debate across the paddock. Max didn't care about that. He took the win and Honda took its first victory since 2006. At this point, Ricciardo was 100% regretting his decision because he was having a pretty horrendous time at Renault. Max finished 2019 third in the championship with 3 wins, 9 podiums, and 2 poles. More importantly, he had completely established something new inside Red Bull. By this point, the conversation around Verstappen had shifted from is he too aggressive to something far more uncomfortable for the rest of the grid. What happens when this guy finally has a car capable of fighting for a championship? That answer arrived in 2021. From the first race in Bahrain, it was clear that this was not going to be a comfortable season for anyone. Max took pole, fought Lewis Hamilton wheel to wheel, passed him on track, then had to give the position back for exceeding track limits. At Imola, he went around the outside of Hamilton at the start and never looked back. The title fight was officially alive. What followed was one of the most intense championship battles in modern Formula One history. A win in Monaco, Azerbaijan heartbreak after a tire failure while leading comfortably, France, where he hunted Hamilton down late in the race and passed him with 1 lap remaining, then Austria, where he delivered a Grand Slam pole, win, fastest lap, led every lap, and strung together 3 consecutive victories in 3 weeks. Then came Silverstone. The high-speed collision that caused between Verstappen and Hamilton resulted in a 51G impact into the barriers. Hungary followed with first-lap chaos that damaged his car and handed momentum back to Mercedes. The points swung back and forth, sometimes by margins so small they felt fictional. They entered the final race in Abu Dhabi tied on points, exactly level. After an entire season of trading blows like pro MMA players, neither had an advantage. Max took pole, lost the lead at the start, and trailed Hamilton for most of the race. It looked over. And then a late safety car changed everything. What followed remains one of the most controversial finishes in the sport's history. On the final lap of the season, Verstappen overtook Hamilton at turn 5, becoming the first Dutch driver to win the F1 championship. As if that wasn't enough, the next year, Verstappen racked up 15 wins in a season, breaking the record jointly held by Michael Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel, 454 points. And then 2023 happened, and I genuinely don't know how to explain this to you without sounding like I'm making it up. It started normal enough. Win in Bahrain, fine. Saudi Arabia, his qualifying gets ruined by a drive shaft failure, starts 15th, still finishes 2nd. Australia wins again. Azerbaijan, he lets Checo cook, but then Miami came around and something in this man's brain just snapped. He started 9th because red flags ended his qualifying lap early, and he just drove through the entire field like the other 19 drivers were speed bumps, including his own teammate, who was on pole from 9th. That was just the warm-up. What happened next was so unhinged that I need you to sit down for this. Monaco, Spain, Canada, where he also handed Red Bull their 100th win as a team. Britain, where Lando Norris briefly took the lead and probably felt amazing about himself for roughly 45 seconds before Max snatched it back like it was his lunch. Hungary, where he and Hamilton basically tied in qualifying, 0.003 seconds apart, which is essentially the same lap time, and Max just overtook him at turn 1 and vanished. Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, 10 consecutive wins. He broke Vettel's record of 9 straight victories, a record that every analyst, every pundit, every person who has watched the sport for more than 6 months assumed was completely untouchable. And Red Bull also broke McLaren's 1988 record for consecutive team wins along the way. So, in one streak, Max Verstappen casually erased 2 of the most legendary records in Formula One history, like he was clearing browser history. Singapore stopped the run because both Red Bulls got knocked out in Q2 and he finished 5th. One bad weekend, that's literally it. After that, he won the remaining 7 races without breaking a sweat, 19 wins total, 575 points, more than double what his teammates scored. sport. He broke his own records from 2022, which he had just set the year before. The man was competing against himself at this point because nobody else was relevant. Now 2024. Season starts beautifully. Grand Slam in Bahrain, his 5th career clean sweep, 100th podium in Saudi Arabia, Australia, pole position. Then a brake fire on lap 4 sends him out, snapping a 43 race finishing streak. Fine, he recovered in Japan, win. China, sprint win and race win. 7 victories in the first 10 rounds. Dominant, right? Except the McLaren was faster. Not a little faster, meaningfully faster. And from around the midpoint of the season, Max Verstappen was essentially doing what no driver is supposed to be able to do, which is win a championship in a car that isn't the quickest thing on the track. Austria was a turning point. He led most of the race. Norris challenged him late, then collided. Max got a time penalty, finished 5th. He openly said his own car was now behind a McLaren on pace, and he still led the championship by 78 points going into summer break. Now, at some point during the 2024 season, Max wasn't just fighting McLaren and his own team, he was also somehow at war with the people whose entire job is to regulate the sport fairly, the FIA. It started at the Singapore Grand Prix press conference. Max was asked about his car's performance and described it in a way that rhymes with trucked.
As soon as I went into qualifying, I knew the car was.
The FIA called Max to the steward's room and handed him community service hours. Now the man responsible for this groundbreaking piece of legislation is Mohammed Ben Sulayem, president of the FIA, and a person who has spent considerable energy making himself the most talked about figure in F1 for all the wrong reasons. This is the same man who crashed a Renault F1 car in 2009 after apparently deciding that being a 14-time Middle East rally champion meant he didn't need to listen to the team's instructions. He had public standoffs with Lewis Hamilton for reasons that were never entirely clear. He made Oscar Piastri visibly uncomfortable at a public event until Oscar basically told him to back off. And now he was penalizing Max Verstappen for saying a word that gets said approximately 400 times per race weekend by everyone involved. And from that point on, Max made sure he gave the driest possible answers every interview.
And can we also just have a word about this FIA situation? You had to go, you've got some sort of community. No words.
Sao Paulo, though, needs its own documentary. He started 17th because of an engine penalty. Norris was on pole, the championship lead was shrinking. On paper, this looked like a crisis. He gained 7 positions on 1 lap alone. He stayed out on intermediate tires longer than anyone else as the weather got worse and worse, surviving on pure instinct while other drivers were pinning and panicking. When the red flag came, he was leading. After the restart, he set 10 of the 11 fastest laps in the race. His quickest lap was over a second faster than literally anyone else on the circuit. He won by 19 seconds. Eddie Jordan watched that race and called it a masterclass of how a driver reaches the absolute pinnacle of the sport. The Guardian called him a Regenmeister, which means Rainmaster in German, which is honestly the coldest nickname in motorsport history. Las Vegas sealed the championship, and this made it 4 world titles. First driver since Nelson Piquet in 1983 to win a title with a team that finished 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. Absolutely deranged. And Red Bull was genuinely struggling, like crisis meeting behind closed doors struggling. We surely have Lando and Oscar to thank for what happened in 2025, because if not for those two, Verstappen might have turned F1 into F3, seeing as it would no longer have been competitive or fun. For the first time in 4 years, Max Verstappen entered a season not as the overwhelming favorite, but as the one chasing. He had a pretty rough start to the season, but that wasn't enough to put him down, as he clawed his way back to the top, finishing the season above Oscar Piastri, who had led the championship for the longest stretch of the start of the year. McLaren arrived as the team to beat, faster car, 2 talented drivers, momentum from a strong end to 2024. On paper, this was their championship to lose, and they did their absolute best to lose it. McLaren's problem in 2025 was themselves. Specifically, it was a complete inability to just let their drivers race. It got so bad that in Singapore 2025, Oscar Piastri turned off Zak Brown's radio mid-race. A racing driver in the middle of a Grand Prix decided that whatever his team principal was about to say was so unnecessary that he simply chose not to hear it. Italy came around, where he set the fastest pole lap in Formula 1 history, then won the race by 19 seconds at record average speed, just in case you forgot who he was. Azerbaijan, a Grand Slam, back-to-back wins in the United States. Las Vegas, where both McLarens got disqualified after the race and handed him a victory he had already earned anyway. 8 wins, most of any driver in 2025. He finished the championship 2 points behind behind Norris, 2 points. After starting the year with a crash that was allegedly behind Ferrari and Mercedes, collecting penalties, dealing with a team in crisis, and watching Piastri lead the championship for the longest stretch, he still nearly won it. If that's what a down year looks like for Max Verstappen, the rest of the grid should probably just go home. With new regulations reshaping the competitive order, Verstappen goes into 2026 in unfamiliar territory once more. Red Bull pairs him with Isak Hadjar, although I'm not sure how long it would last. Verstappen has also announced that he would run the number 3 on his car, taking advantage of the FIA's regulation change that allowed drivers to switch numbers ahead of the new era, rather than reverting to previous selections. Red Bull's recent development struggles don't exactly inspire confidence going into a regulation change of this magnitude. Their 2024 and 2025 form showed a team that can be caught off guard by its own car. Red Bull could realistically find themselves behind the curve in the early stages of 2026. And here is where it splits into 2 genuinely terrifying possibilities. The first one, Red Bull nail the 2026 regulations and produce a competitive car. If that happens, and Max Verstappen gets machinery that matches his ability again, it's very hard to construct a realistic argument for how anyone stops him. We're talking about a driver who won a championship in 2024 while fighting his own team, a faster car, and the governing body simultaneously. Give him a proper weapon and the conversation might end before it starts. The second one, Red Bull get it wrong. The car is slow, the team is struggling, and Max finds himself fighting from a deficit again. And it just means the rest of the grid has to deal with a hungry, motivated, thoroughly irritated Max Verstappen who has a point to prove, which, if anything, is the more dangerous version. Formula 1 has had dominant drivers before. Schumacher dominated with Ferrari's full machinery and resources behind him. Hamilton dominated with the most dominant car the sport has ever seen. Both legends, both deserving of everything they achieved. There will be other great champions. There will be other exciting drivers, but there will not be another one like this. A guy built in the most chaotic conditions imaginable, who operates with total indifference to what anyone thinks, wins in ways that shouldn't be possible, and whose idea of relaxing after a championship fight is logging back onto a sim racing game at midnight. There will never be another Max Verstappen. And honestly, the FIA should probably be relieved about that.